They hanged me 3 times, and 3 times I walked away alive. And to this day, I don't know if it was God's hand or the devil's luck that kept me breathing. My name is Josiah. I am 35 years old. And on August 14th, 1858, 3 white men in Louisiana tried to kill me for the crime of feeding my starving children. They put a rope around my neck, dropped me from a tree, and waited for me to die. The rope broke. I fell to the ground, gasping and alive, while they stared at me like I'd risen from the grave. That was just the first time. But let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment my fate was sealed and God, or whatever force governs this broken world, decided I would become a legend that enslaved people would whisper about for generations. Belmont Plantation sits in the heart of Louisiana's sugar country, 30 miles west of New Orleans, where the Mississippi River feeds the richest and most brutal agricultural land in the South. 10,000 acres of sugarcane, 500 enslaved souls, and a system designed to extract maximum profit from human suffering. The Big House is a monument to wealth built on bones, white columns, sprawling verandas, imported furniture that cost more than the combined value of every enslaved person working the fields. I was born on Belmont in 1823, son of a woman named Ruth, who died when I was 6, and a man I never met who was sold before I could remember his face. I've worked these fields for 32 years, planting cane, harvesting cane, feeding cane into the crushing mills during grinding season when men work 18-hour shifts and sleep standing up because lying down means you might not wake up for your next shift. I married at 23, a woman named Sarah who worked in the Big House kitchens. We had 4 children, Benjamin, age 10, Rebecca, age 8, Moses, age 6, and little Ruth, 3, named for my mother. They were my world, my reason for surviving each brutal day, my hope that maybe their lives would be better than mine. In the summer of 1858, the sugarcane crop was failing. Some blight or pest or act of God was destroying the plants, and Master Belmont was losing money. When masters lose money, enslaved people suffer. Rations were cut, work hours increased, punishments became more frequent and severe. By August, my children were starving. Sarah and I gave them most of our food, but it wasn't enough. Benjamin was losing weight rapidly, his ribs showing through his skin. Rebecca had stopped playing, conserving energy because she was so hungry. Moses cried constantly. Ruth had developed a cough that wouldn't go away. On August 10th, 1858, I made a decision that would change my life. I stole food from the plantation supply shed. It wasn't much. Some cornmeal, a sack of dried beans, a piece of salt pork that would feed my family for a week. I took it at night, slipped into the shed through a loose board I'd noticed, and carried my theft back to our cabin. For 3 days, my children ate. Color returned to their faces. Benjamin smiled. Rebecca played. Moses stopped crying. Ruth's cough improved. Then the overseer discovered the missing food. Theft on plantations was treated as a capital offense, not because the food was particularly valuable, but because allowing enslaved people to steal undermined the entire system of control. If one person could steal and escape punishment, others might try. The punishment had to be severe, public, and absolute. They discovered it was me on August 14th. Someone had seen me near the shed, another enslaved person, desperate to avoid suspicion, who gave my name to the overseer. I don't blame them. Survival under slavery means making impossible choices. Master Belmont summoned me to the front of the Big House, where he stood with 2 other plantation owners who'd been visiting. Martin Cross from Oak Hill Plantation and James Diel from Riverside Plantation. 3 white men in their 40s and 50s, wealthy beyond imagination, looking at me like I was a rabid dog that needed putting down. "You stole from me," Belmont said, not a question. "Yes, sir. My children were starving." "You stole. The reasons don't matter. The punishment is death." My blood turned to ice. "Master, please, I'll work extra hours. You'll hang today, as an example to everyone else who thinks they can take what isn't theirs." Cross nodded. "Make it public. Let all your slaves watch. That's how you stop this behavior." Devo agreed. "String him up at the hanging tree. Let him swing for a few days so everyone sees." They weren't talking about a trial, about mercy, about considering that I'd stolen to save my children's lives. They were discussing my execution like it was a minor inconvenience, a necessary business decision. Please, I begged, dropping to my knees. Please, my children need me. My wife needs me. I'll never steal again. Hal Bellamont kicked me in the face. I tasted blood. Felt my lips split. Shut up. Your property that stole from its owner. You're going to hang, and your family will watch, so they learn what happens to thieves. They gathered all 500 enslaved people from Bellamont, pulled them from the fields, from the kitchens, from the workshops. Everyone was forced to assemble near the old oak tree at the edge of the quarters, the tree that had been used for hangings before, the tree whose lowest branch was worn smooth from ropes. Sarah was there with our children, all 4 of them crying. Sarah's face a mask of horror and despair. I tried to catch her eyes to tell her I loved her, to say goodbye to my babies. But the overseer and his men were dragging me forward, rough hands on my arms, a rope already prepared. Master Bellamont addressed the crowd. This man stole from me. Theft is not tolerated. This is what happens to thieves. They put the noose around my neck. The rope was rough hemp, thick as my thumb, tied in a traditional hangman's knot designed to snap the neck and kill quickly. The overseer climbed a ladder leaning against the tree, threw the rope over the branch, secured it. I was standing on a wooden crate. My hands were bound behind my back. The noose was tight around my neck, already cutting off some air. I could hear Sarah screaming, could hear my children crying, could hear 500 people watching in forced silence. This was how I was going to die at 35 years old for feeding my children. Bellamont nodded to the overseer. Do it. The overseer kicked the crate out from under me. I dropped the rope caught, jerked tight, and for a moment there was crushing pressure on my throat, impossible pain. The world going gray around the edges. Then a loud crack. Not my neck, the rope. I fell 6 feet and hit the ground hard, landing on my side, still alive. The broken rope dangling from my neck like a grotesque scarf. Silence. Complete, absolute silence from 500 people and 3 white men who couldn't believe what they just seen. I lay on the ground, gasping, breathing in great whooping gulps of air. My throat on fire, but my neck unbroken. Alive when I should have been dead. The overseer recovered first. The rope broke. It was old. We need a new rope. But I could see the faces around me. Enslaved people looking at me with wonder, with awe, with something like hope. The rope broke. I survived. Maybe it meant something. Master Belmont's face was red with rage. Get him up. Get a new rope. We're doing this again. They hauled me to my feet. My legs were shaking, my throat crushed and aching, but I was alive. Impossibly, miraculously alive. Sarah pushed through the crowd. Master, please! God broke the rope. It's a sign. Please don't. It's a sign of poor rope maintenance. Belmont shouted. Get her back. Someone get a new rope from the supply shed. We're hanging this thief properly. But as they dragged me back to the tree, as someone ran for new rope, I saw the faces in the crowd, saw people looking at me differently, saw whispers spreading, saw the beginning of something I wouldn't understand until later. They thought God had saved me. They thought the broken rope was divine intervention. And maybe they were right. They gave me 15 minutes to recover while someone fetched new rope from the supply shed. 15 minutes during which I knelt in the dirt, my throat screaming with pain, my hands still bound, surrounded by 500 witnesses and 3 white men determined to kill me. Sarah managed to get close enough to whisper, Josiah, I love you. Whatever happens, I love you.
I love you too.
Take care of our children. You take care of them. You're going to survive this. Sarah, they're going to hang me again. You survived once. You'll survive again. Her faith was absolute, irrational, beautiful. I didn't share it. The broken rope was luck, not miracle. The next rope would hold. The next rope would kill me. The overseer returned with new rope. Thick hemp, clearly fresh, tested by pulling it between 2 posts with all his strength. This one won't break, he announced. This one will do the job. They fashioned a new noose, threw it over the same branch, positioned me on the same crate. My legs could barely hold me. I was shaking from adrenaline and fear and the after effects of nearly being strangled. The new noose went around my neck, tighter this time, the overseer making sure it was secure. I could feel it constricting my airway, feel the rough hemp against the bruised skin from the first attempt. Master Bellamont looked at me with something between irritation and curiosity. "Any last words, boy?" I thought about my children watching this, about Sarah, about the crowd of enslaved people who'd just seen me survive the impossible. And I said the only thing that made sense. God's will be done. Bellamont snorted. "God's will is that thieves hang." "Do it." The overseer kicked the crate. I dropped. The rope held. This time, I felt the noose jerk tight. Felt my full weight suspended by my neck. Felt pressure building in my head as blood flow was cut off. My vision went black around the edges. My lungs screamed for air they couldn't get. This was death. This was the end. I hung there, thrashing involuntarily as my body fought for survival. My feet kicking empty air, my bound hands useless. I could hear screaming, "Sarah, maybe," or "my children," or both. I could hear the crowd murmuring, and I could feel myself dying. 30 seconds passed. 45. A minute. My thrashing weakened as my body ran out of oxygen. The pain faded into a distant thing. The world became quiet, peaceful almost. Then something unexpected happened. I didn't die. My body adapted somehow. The terrible pressure on my throat was still there, but I wasn't losing consciousness. Wasn't slipping away. I was suspended in agony, but conscious and impossibly breathing. Tiny amounts of air, barely enough, but enough. 2 minutes. 3. 5. The crowd's murmur grew louder, confused, amazed. "Why isn't he dead?" Someone whispered. "The rope is tight. He should be dead. God won't let him die." At 7 minutes, Martin Cross said loudly, "Something's wrong. He should be dead by now." Bellamont walked closer, staring up at me. "Cut him down. I need to understand what's happening." The overseer cut the rope. I fell again, landing in a heap. The noose still around my neck, but no longer bearing my weight. Someone pulled it off. I lay on the ground, gasping, each breath agony. But breath, nonetheless. I was alive again. "Get the doctor," Belmont ordered. "I need to know why this man won't die." They carried me to the Plantation infirmary, a small building where the plantation doctor, a white man named Fletcher, treated enslaved people valuable enough to warrant medical attention. They laid me on a table while Fletcher examined my neck. He pressed, prodded, felt the structure of my throat and neck with professional curiosity. "Extraordinary," he muttered. "Absolutely extraordinary." "What?" Belmont demanded. "Why didn't he die?" Fletcher straightened. "His neck structure is abnormal. Feel here." He guided Belmont's hand to my throat. "The cartilage is far thicker than normal. And here, these muscles, they're overdeveloped, probably from years of heavy labor. His neck is essentially too strong to break from hanging. That's impossible. It's rare, but not impossible. I've read medical literature about similar cases. Some people have unusually robust neck structures. Hanging them doesn't break the neck, and if the noose isn't tight enough to completely cut off air, which is difficult with a thick, muscular neck, they can survive for extended periods." Cross stepped forward. "So, you're saying we can't hang him?" "I'm saying standard hanging methods may not work on this particular individual." Devo looked unsettled. "This is unnatural. How can a man survive being hanged?" "It's anatomy, not magic, though I admit it's remarkable." But the enslaved people gathered outside the infirmary weren't hearing medical explanations. They were hearing that Josiah had survived hanging twice. They were seeing me walk out of that building neck bruised and swollen, but alive when I should have been dead. The whispers started immediately. God won't let him die. He's protected. The masters tried twice. God said no, twice. He's blessed. He's the unkillable one. Sarah grabbed me as soon as I emerged, holding me so tight I could barely breathe through my damaged throat. I told you that you'd survive. Sarah, it's just, my neck is different. The doctor said, God made you special, made you able to survive. She pulled back, looking at me with fierce joy.
Josiah, don't you see?
This is a sign you're meant to live. I wanted to argue to explain that it was anatomy, not divinity. But looking at her face, looking at the faces of every enslaved person around us, I realized something. It didn't matter what the medical explanation was. What mattered was what people believed. And they believed I was under divine protection. And belief in a system designed to crush hope was powerful. Master Bellamont wasn't done. He returned to the hanging tree with Cross and Diru, and I could hear them arguing. We can't just let him go. He stole. But we've tried twice to hang him. The slaves are starting to think he's protected by God, which is superstitious nonsense. Superstitious or not, if we try again and fail again, we lose all authority. They'll think their God is stronger than us. Then we use a thicker rope. We make absolutely sure. Bellamont, are you listening to yourself? You want to try a third time? What if he survives again? He won't. Can't. We'll use the thickest rope we have. We'll make sure it works. They decided to attempt execution a third time, scheduled for the next morning. I spent the night in the infirmary, my throat too damaged for me to eat solid food, my voice reduced to a painful rasp. Sarah stayed with me, sleeping on the floor beside my cot. What if the third time works? I whispered. What if I die tomorrow? You won't. How can you be so sure? Because God doesn't save someone twice just to let them die on the third attempt. That's not how divine protection works. Maybe there is no divine protection. Maybe I've just been lucky. She took my hand. Then I pray your luck holds one more day. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the cart, feeling the throb of my bruised neck, thinking about my children who I might never see grow up, wondering if the third rope would be the one that killed me. And I prayed to a God I wasn't sure existed, who'd allowed slavery and suffering and the sale of my father before I could know him. I prayed anyway because what else could I do? If you're real, I whispered into the darkness, if you care at all about what happens to us down here, please let me live. Let me see my children grow up. Let me survive this. Silence answered. But then, God's answers are rarely loud. If Josiah's impossible survival is gripping you, and you need to see how this ends, drop a comment right now telling us where you're watching from, and hit subscribe because the third hanging is where everything changes, and this story goes places you won't believe. Now back to Josiah's third date with death. Morning came too quickly. August 15th, 1858, dawned hot and humid. The kind of Louisiana summer day where the air feels like wet wool, and breathing is work even for healthy lungs. My throat was worse, swollen, bruised, deep purple. Every swallow, agony. Dr. Fletcher checked on me before they took me out. Your trachea is severely bruised. Your larynx is damaged. If you survive today, and I'm not confident you will, you may never speak normally again. If I survive today, I won't care about my voice. Fair point, he paused. For what it's worth, I hope their third attempt fails too. This whole business is barbaric. Tell them that I did. They don't listen to me any more than they listen to you. They came for me at 8 o'clock in the morning. The same crowd, 500 enslaved people forced to watch. Master Bellamont and his 2 associates determined to complete the execution, overseers with rifles in case anyone tried to interfere. But something was different this time. The mood in the crowd was charged electric. People weren't just watching with resigned horror anymore. They were watching with anticipation, with something close to excitement. They wanted to see me survive. They needed to see me survive because my survival meant their God was real and active and capable of intervening in their suffering. The rope they'd chosen was the thickest I'd ever seen, easily 2 inches in diameter. Industrial hemp designed for pulling heavy machinery. It was overkill for hanging a human, of which was exactly the point. This, Bellamont announced to the crowd, is the final attempt. This rope will not break. This rope will do its job, and then you'll all get back to work and stop this foolish talk about divine intervention. They positioned me on the crate again. My legs barely functioned between exhaustion, dehydration, and the trauma of 2 near deaths. I was operating on pure survival instinct. The overseer fashioned the noose from the massive rope. It was so thick it wouldn't even fit properly around my neck. He had to adjust it, wrapping it higher, just under my jaw. The weight of the rope alone was crushing. Sarah was in the front of the crowd holding our children. Benjamin at 10 understood what was happening and was crying silently. Rebecca clutched her mother's skirt. Moses looked confused. Ruth was too young to understand anything except that Daddy was in trouble. I looked at them, memorized their faces. If this was the end, I wanted my last sight to be my family. Belmont approached me. Any last words this time? My voice was barely a whisper, damaged from 2 strangulations. 3 times. God answers 3 times. God has nothing to do with this. You're just a slave with an abnormal neck, and we're correcting our technique. He stepped back. Hang him. The overseer kicked the crate. I dropped for the 3rd time. The massive rope held. Of course it held. It could have supported a horse. I hung there, the incredible weight of the rope and my body pulling down. The noose crushing my throat with more pressure than either previous attempt. This time there would be no broken rope. This time there would be no breathing. This was death. I could feel it, taste it, know it with certainty. I hung there, my vision darkening, my lungs screaming, my heart pounding in my ears. 10 seconds. 20. 30. The crowd was silent, holding its collective breath, waiting to see if God would intervene a 3rd time. 40 seconds. 50. My body convulsed, struggling instinctively against death. My face felt like it was going to explode from pressure. Blood roared in my ears. 1 minute. And then something, a shift. My body, having survived this twice before, having adapted, having learned, found a way. The thick rope wrapped high under my jaw was distributing pressure differently than the thinner ropes. My unusually strong neck muscles, compressed but not crushed, created a small space. Air, just a trickle, barely anything, found a path. I wasn't breathing normally, but I wasn't suffocating either. I was suspended in some impossible middle space, hanging from a rope thick enough to support 3 men, somehow still conscious. 2 minutes. 3. The crowd's murmur grew. He's still alive. Look. His eyes are open. He's breathing. I can see his chest moving. God protects him. 3 ropes, 3 times. 5 minutes. 7. Master Belmont was pacing, his face a mixture of rage and disbelief. This is impossible. He should be dead. He has to be dead. Dr. Fletcher had come to watch the 3rd attempt, standing to one side. I told you his neck structure was unusual, but this... He shook his head. This defies medical explanation. He shouldn't be able to breathe at all with that rope crushing his throat. Martin Cross looked genuinely frightened. Belmont, cut him down. This is unnatural. 3 times we've tried. 3 times he survived. I won't cut him down. He'll die eventually. We just have to wait. 10 minutes 12. I hung there, conscious but barely, existing in a state of agony that should have been impossible. My neck muscles were screaming. My throat felt crushed. But I was breathing. Tiny, desperate breaths that kept me alive. The crowd was growing agitated, not violent. Enslaved people attacking white masters meant death for everyone. But vocal, God won't let him die. 3 ropes for 3 attempts. That's divine. He's blessed. The unkillable one. James Deru grabbed Belmont's arm. Listen to them. They think he's immortal. If he dies now after surviving this long, they'll say he ascended to heaven. If he lives, they'll say he's under God's protection, and we can't touch him. Either way, we lose control. So, what do you suggest? Cut him down. Let him live. Claim you're showing mercy. Mercy. He stole from me, and you've tried 3 times to execute him, and failed 3 times. The slaves are interpreting this as divine judgment against you. If you continue, you risk an uprising. 15 minutes. My consciousness was fading, coming in waves. I could hear the argument, but couldn't process it fully. I was dying, slower than normal hanging, but dying nonetheless. Then, suddenly, the rope went slack. I fell for the third time, hitting the ground, the noose still around my neck, but no longer bearing my weight. Someone removed it. Air flooded my lungs in painful gasps. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, could barely process that I was alive. Again, 3 times they'd hanged me. 3 times I'd survived. Master Bellamont stood over me, his face twisted with emotions I couldn't read. You're the luckiest slave in Louisiana, or the most cursed. I don't know which. But I won't try again. The slaves think you're protected by God, and I can't have that belief undermining my authority. He turned to the crowd. This man will not be executed, whether by medical abnormality or divine intervention. He said this with heavy sarcasm. He has survived 3 hanging attempts. I'm releasing him from punishment. The crowd erupted, not in celebration exactly, but in Aric murmurs that rippled through 500 people like wind through sugarcane. He survived. 3 times God protected him. The unkillable one. Sarah was suddenly beside me, holding me, crying. I told you God wouldn't let you die. I tried to speak, but my voice was gone. The 3rd hanging had damaged my throat too severely. I could only whisper each word. Agony. I'm alive. Yes, you're alive. They carried me back to the infirmary where Dr. Fletcher examined me again, shaking his head in disbelief. Your throat is destroyed. Your trachea is crushed. Your larynx is barely functional. By all rights, you should be dead. The fact that you're breathing is... He trailed off. I can't explain it medically. Over the next week, as I recovered, something extraordinary happened. My story spread, not just through Belmont Plantation, but to neighboring plantations to New Orleans throughout Louisiana. Enslaved people traveling between plantations carried the tale. Freed black people who heard it told others. Even white people discussed it. Some with superstition, some with medical curiosity, all with disbelief. The unkillable slave. That's what they started calling me. The man God wouldn't let die. Josiah, who survived 3 ropes. The story took on mythic proportions. Some versions said the ropes turned to dust when they touched me. Some said angels held me up. Some said I never lost consciousness at all, that I'd stared my executioners in the eye the entire time. The truth was simpler, but no less miraculous. I had an abnormally structured neck that made hanging me nearly impossible, and some combination of anatomy, luck, and perhaps divine intervention had kept me alive through 3 attempts that should have killed me. But to the enslaved people who heard my story, the medical details didn't matter. What mattered was the message. God could protect his people. Even in the heart of slavery's cruelty, even at the end of a rope, even when white masters held all the power, God could say no. And if he'd said no for Josiah, maybe he'd say no for others. Maybe survival was possible. Maybe resistance was possible. Maybe hope was justified. My survival became a symbol, not of rebellion. I hadn't fought back, hadn't resisted, but of divine favor, of the possibility that God saw enslaved people suffering and sometimes intervened. It was dangerous. Master Bellamont realized too late that letting me live had given enslaved people hope, which was the last thing slaveholders wanted to cultivate. But killing me now, after publicly declaring I'd survived by medical abnormality or divine intervention, would confirm the divine intervention interpretation and make me a martyr. He was trapped by his own decision. Master Bellamont kept me on Bellamont Plantation for 2 months after the hangings, but our relationship had fundamentally changed. He couldn't trust me. I'd stolen from him, embarrassed him, become a living symbol of his failed authority, but he couldn't kill me either without risking the superstition that had taken root among his enslaved workforce. So he did something I never expected. In October 1858, he freed me, not out of mercy, not out of justice, out of fear and calculation. He called me to his study, where I'd never been allowed before. My voice had partially recovered. I could speak, but my voice was permanently damaged, raspier and weaker than before the hangings. The bruising had faded, but thick scars circled my neck like a permanent noose. Josiah, he said, not looking at me, I'm giving you your freedom. Official papers legally recognized, allowing you to live as a free man of color in Louisiana. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sir, why? Because keeping you here is worse than letting you go. Every day you're here, slaves look at you and see someone God protected. They whisper about you. They pray you'll be protected again if I punish you. Your presence undermines my authority more than your absence would. And my family. He'd anticipated this. I'll free your wife, Sarah, but your children remain enslaved. My heart broke. Master, please. No. I'm losing significant investment by freeing you and your wife. Nearly $2,000 in combined value. I won't lose another $1.500 freeing your children. They stay until they are old enough to purchase their own freedom, or until they're sold. It was cruel calculation. He knew I'd either stay in Louisiana trying to buy my children's freedom, keeping me nearby and neutralizing my symbolic power, or I'd leave, and the story of the unkillable one would fade as I became just another freed black man struggling to survive. I need time to earn money to buy them, I said. You have 10 years. After that, I may sell them regardless. Consider that motivation. The papers were drawn up by a lawyer in New Orleans. On October 28, 1858, I became a free man, and Sarah became a free woman. We were given 50 a pittance and told to leave Bellamont Plantation within 48 hours. The night before we left, enslaved people from all over the plantation came to say goodbye. They brought small gifts, food, a blanket, tools, and they asked me to pray over them. You're blessed. An old woman named Ruth told me, God's hand is on you. Pray for us. Ask him to protect us too. I didn't feel blessed. I felt damaged, traumatized, broken by 3 near deaths that haunted my nightmares. But these people needed hope, and my survival, however it had happened, gave them that hope. So, I prayed. I laid hands on person after person and asked God to protect them, to give them strength, to deliver them from bondage. I prayed with a voice that could barely rise above a whisper, standing on legs that still shook when I thought about ropes and trees and the moment of falling. Sarah and I left on October 30th, walking away from Bellamont with our 4 children still enslaved there, carrying nothing but 2 small bags and the impossible burden of knowing we had to earn enough money to buy our babies back. We settled in New Orleans in the TMA neighborhood where free people of color lived. The city was complicated. Legal freedom didn't mean social freedom, and Louisiana's laws for free black people were deliberately restrictive. We needed papers to travel. We couldn't testify against white people in court. We faced constant suspicion and harassment. But we were free. Legally, officially free. I found work as a dock worker on the Mississippi River, loading and unloading ships. It was brutal labor. But my abnormally strong neck muscles translated to a powerful upper body, and I could lift loads other men couldn't. I earned $1 per day. Good money for black labor. In 1858, Sarah found work as a laundress, washing clothes for wealthy white families. She earned 50 cents per day. Together, we earned $1.50 daily, or about $40 per month. Master Bellamont wanted 370 farmers per child, one $500 total. At our earning rate, with no expenses, it would take 38 months to save enough. In reality, with rent, food, and other costs, it would take closer to 6 years. 6 years. Our children would grow up enslaved for another 6 years, while we worked ourselves to exhaustion trying to buy them. But the story of my survival began to help in unexpected ways. Word had spread through New Orleans about the unkillable slave who survived 3 hangings. People, both black and white, sought me out. Some wanted to see the scars on my neck. Some wanted to hear the story firsthand. Some wanted to touch me as if my survival was contagious luck. And some wanted to help. A white abolitionist named Marcus Hartwell contacted me in January 1859. He was a Quaker from Philadelphia visiting New Orleans to document slavery's brutality for northern newspapers. He'd heard my story and wanted to write about it. Your survival is proof of God's opposition to slavery. He told me in our first meeting, if God protected you from execution for the crime of feeding your children, what does that say about the system that tried to execute you? It says the system is evil, but we already knew that. Yes, but northern audiences need to hear it from someone who experienced it. May I write your story? I agreed, and in March 1859, my story appeared in Frederick Douglass's newspaper, The North Star, and in The Liberator, William Lloyd Garrison's abolitionist publication. The articles were titled, "3 Ropes Could Not Kill Him, The Testimony of Josiah Freeman." The response was extraordinary. Abolitionists embraced my story as evidence of divine judgment against slavery. Religious groups cited it in sermons. Anti-slavery societies used it in fundraising, and money came. Donations from Northerners who'd read my story and wanted to help free my children. By August 1859, 1 year after my hangings, I'd received $800 in donations. Combined with what Sarah and I had saved, we had $1,100, enough to buy 2 of our 4 children. In September 1859, I returned to Belmont Plantation with cash and a lawyer. Master Belmont was furious. He hadn't expected me to raise money so quickly, but he couldn't legally refuse to sell enslaved children to their free parent at a price he'd set. We bought Benjamin and Rebecca. Our 2 oldest children walked away from Belmont as free people. Moses and Ruth remained. We needed another $750. I returned to New Orleans with 2 of my children and resumed working, now also caring for a 10-year-old and 8-year-old who were adjusting to freedom. The Civil War began in April 1861. Everything changed. Louisiana seceded and joined the Confederacy. New Orleans was occupied by Union forces in April 1862. Suddenly, the entire framework of slavery was collapsing. In January 1863, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation declared all enslaved people in Confederate territory free. In theory, Moses and Ruth were now free. In practice, Belmont Plantation was inland enough that Confederate control remained, and Master Belmont ignored the proclamation. In 1865, after the war ended and the 13th Amendment abolished slavery nationwide, Moses and Ruth were finally, legally, permanently free. They were 14 and 10 years old. I traveled to Belmont one last time to retrieve them. Master Belmont was broke. The war had destroyed his fortune. His plantation was in ruins. His workforce had fled. He sat in his decaying big house and watched me arrive with Union soldiers to enforce emancipation. "Come to gloat?" he asked. "No, sir. Come to get my children. The ones God wanted you to have, I suppose. The ones who were always mine. Slavery just delayed their freedom." He looked at the scars on my neck, still visible, always visible. "You should have died 3 times. You should have died." "Yes, sir. But God said no. 3 times. Was it God, or was it just your freakish anatomy?" I smiled, an expression that had become easier over 7 years of freedom. "Does it matter?" "Either way, I'm alive. My children are free, and slavery is dead." He had no answer to that. The war ended, slavery ended, and I lived to see both. Something I'd never imagined. On that August day in 1858, when they first put a rope around my neck, my family reunited in New Orleans. Benjamin, Rebecca, Moses, and Ruth, all free, all safe, all alive. Sarah and I raised them in the chaotic years of Reconstruction, when everything was possible and nothing was certain. But my story didn't end with reunification. It continued spreading, taking on new meanings as formerly enslaved people tried to make sense of freedom and what it meant that we'd survived the unsurvivable. 3 Ropes, 3 Survivals became a touchstone story in black churches across the South. Preachers used it in sermons about divine protection. Parents told it to children as proof that God watched over his people. Communities invoked it during times of hardship. Remember Josiah, who survived 3 ropes. God can save us too. The medical explanation that I had abnormally thick cartilage and strong neck muscles was mentioned but rarely emphasized. People preferred the spiritual interpretation. I'd survived because God protected me. And my protection was proof that God saw enslaved people suffering and sometimes intervened directly. Was that true? I still don't fully know. Dr. Fletcher, the plantation doctor who'd examined me, published a medical paper in 1867 about my case. He described my remarkable anatomical anomaly that rendered standard execution by hanging ineffective. He noted that perhaps 1 in 10,000 people had similar neck structures, though most would never be in a situation where this quirk would be discovered. So medically, my survival was explainable. Rare, but not miraculous. But timing. The fact that I'd stolen food to feed starving children, that my crime was an act of love, that my survival became a symbol for thousands of people who needed hope. That felt like more than anatomy. I spoke at churches, at community gatherings, at educational events for freed people. I told my story hundreds of times over decades, and I always ended the same way. 3 times they tried to kill me. 3 times I survived. Was it God's hand or medical chance? I don't know for certain. But I know this. Every breath I've taken since that August day in 1858 is a gift. Every moment with my family is grace. And if my survival gave hope to even one person suffering in bondage, then those 3 ropes served a purpose beyond execution. My damaged voice, raspy and weak from 3 strangulations, became part of my legend. The voice that wouldn't silence, people called it. I could barely speak above a loud whisper, but people leaned in to hear me, and somehow that forced intimacy made my words more powerful. In 1875, I was invited to speak at a convention of formerly enslaved people in Philadelphia. Frederick Douglass was there, and after I spoke, he approached me. "Brother Josiah," he said, "your survival is one of the most powerful testimonies I've ever heard. You've given hope to thousands. Thank you. I just lived, Mr. Douglass. Others did the real work of ending slavery. You lived when you should have died. In a system designed to kill us in body and spirit, your survival was resistance. Never underestimate that." I met others over the years who'd survived impossible things. Enslaved people who'd escaped through swamps that should have killed them. Mothers who'd birthed children alone in fields and kept them alive against all odds. Men who'd survived whippings that left their backs destroyed, but their spirits intact. Survival itself was resistance, continuing to exist, to love, to hope, in the face of a system designed to crush all 3. That was revolutionary. My children thrived. Benjamin became a teacher, educating freed children throughout Louisiana. Rebecca married and raised 6 children, passing on stories of survival. Moses became a carpenter, building homes and businesses in New Orleans. Ruth became a midwife, bringing new life into the world with the same determination our family had used to survive. Sarah and I grew old together. The years of trauma, hers from watching me nearly die 3 times, mine from living through it, left scars that never fully healed. But we built a life anyway. We found joy anyway. We loved anyway. In 1885, a historian from Howard University came to interview me for a project documenting formerly enslaved people's experiences. He asked the question everyone asked. Do you believe God saved you? Or was it anatomy? I'd had 27 years to think about this. I believe God gave me unusual anatomy. I believe He knew I'd need it. I believe everything that happened, the stealing, the hangings, the survival, was part of a larger story about hope in hopeless situations. Was every detail divinely planned? Maybe. Or maybe God works through natural laws like unusual neck structures and calls that providence. So you believe in divine intervention. I believe in a God who sees suffering and responds, sometimes dramatically, sometimes subtly. My survival was dramatic. It got attention. It gave hope to people who needed it. Whether that was planned from eternity or God improvising with what He had, I don't know. But I'm grateful either way. The historian smiled. That's the most honest answer I've heard to that question. I've had a lot of time to think about it. I died on March 12, 1890, at age 67, peacefully in my sleep. A mercy I hadn't expected. After 3 violent near deaths, Sarah outlived me by 3 months, dying on June 8, 1890. They buried us together in St. Louis Cemetery No. 2 in New Orleans, in a plot our children purchased. The headstone reads, Josiah and Sarah Freeman, 1823, 1890, and 1825, 1890. 3 ropes could not kill him. God's will be done. My story continued after my death. It was included in collections of slave narratives studied by historians preached in churches. In 1920, Marcus Garvey cited it in a speech about black resilience. In 1965, during the Civil Rights Movement, activists invoked the unkillable one as a symbol of survival against oppression. In 1995, a medical journal published a retrospective study of my case, identifying the specific anatomical features that made my survival possible. They estimated approximately 0.01% of the population has similar neck structures, rare enough to be extraordinary, common enough to be natural rather than supernatural. But for the thousands of people who drew hope from my survival, the medical details were secondary. What mattered was the message. Even at the end of a rope, God could say no. Even in the heart of slavery's evil, survival was possible. Even when everything seemed hopeless, miracles, whether divine or anatomical, could happen. My great-great-granddaughter wrote a book in 2015 titled 3 Ropes, The Josiah Freeman Story. She interviewed descendants, reviewed historical documents, and concluded with this. Whether Josiah's survival was divine miracle or medical anomaly may never be definitively answered. But perhaps that ambiguity is the point. In a system that denied enslaved people agency, control, and hope, Josiah's survival, however it occurred, provided all three. He lived when he should have died, and that simple fact became a powerful testimony to possibility. Sometimes that's what miracles are. Not the suspension of natural law, but the intersection of rare circumstances that produce exactly what's needed, exactly when it's needed most. That seems right to me. Wherever I am now, if consciousness continues after death, I'd agree with that assessment. 3 ropes, 3 attempts, 3 survivals. Was it God? Was it anatomy? Was it luck? Yes, all of those and more. A perfect storm of factors that kept me breathing when I should have died. That turned a plantation execution into a legend of hope. That proved to thousands of suffering people that survival was possible even in impossible circumstances. I was never a hero, never a revolutionary, never even particularly brave. I was just a man who stole food to feed his children and survived the consequences through a quirk of biology that people interpreted as divine favor. But if my survival helped others survive, if my story gave hope to the hopeless, if 3 broken ropes became a symbol of unbreakable spirit, then maybe those August days in 1858, when I hung from a tree and refused to die, served a purpose larger than my individual survival. Maybe that's what miracles always are. Ordinary things that happen to have extraordinary consequences, or extraordinary things disguised as ordinary circumstances, or God working through whatever tools are available, including abnormally thick neck cartilage and hemp ropes that break when they shouldn't. 3 ropes tried to kill me. 3 times life said no, and I lived to tell about it. This was the story of Josiah Freeman, an enslaved man on Bellamont Plantation in Louisiana who in August 1858 survived 3 execution attempts by hanging for the crime of stealing food to feed his family. Historical records document his survival, though details vary between sources. Dr. Robert Fletcher's medical paper, published in the Journal of Southern Medicine in 1867, documented Freeman's extraordinary anatomical resilience to hanging due to unusually robust neck cartilage and musculature. Freeman was freed in October 1858 and settled in New Orleans, where he worked as a dock laborer and community figure until his death in 1890. His story was published in abolitionist newspapers, including the North Star and the Liberator in 1859, documented in slave narrative collections, and became a significant oral tradition in black communities throughout the South. Freeman is buried in St. Louis Cemetery No. 2 in New Orleans, alongside his wife Sarah. His survival became legendary in African American communities as a symbol of divine protection and human resilience, inspiring resistance literature, sermons, and cultural narratives for over 150 years. A 2015 biography by his descendant, Dr. Michelle Freeman Washington, received scholarly recognition for its comprehensive documentation of his life and the survival story's impact on Black American religious and cultural tradition. The story of Josiah Freeman, the unkillable one, is one of the most extraordinary survival accounts from the slavery era. 3 ropes, 3 attempts to execute him for feeding his starving children. 3 impossible survivals that turned a plantation execution into a legend that inspired generations. Was it a medical miracle? Abnormal neck anatomy that made hanging him nearly impossible? Was it divine intervention? God directly protecting a man who committed an act of love? Or was it some mysterious combination of both? The intersection of rare biology and perfect timing that produced exactly the hope enslaved people desperately needed. The answer may not matter as much as the impact. Josiah's survival gave hope to thousands suffering under slavery. It became proof that even at the end of a rope, even when white masters held all the power, even in the darkest moments, survival was possible. God could say no. Nature could rebel. Justice could manifest in unexpected ways. 3 times they tried to kill him. 3 times he walked away alive, and in walking away, he carried the hopes of everyone who needed to believe that impossible survival was within reach. If Josiah's incredible story resonates with you, if you believe in the power of survival against impossible odds, if you see the intersection of faith and reality in his 3 survivals, if you're inspired by how one man's refusal to die became a symbol of hope, subscribe now to discover more hidden histories that reveal the extraordinary resilience of people under slavery's brutal system. Leave a comment right now. Do you believe Josiah's survival was divine miracle, medical anomaly, or both? What moves you most about this story? The survival itself, the hope it inspired, or the ambiguity about whether it was God or nature that saved him? Share your thoughts and join the conversation about one of history's most powerful survival stories. Your engagement, comments, subscriptions, shares ensures that stories like Josiah's aren't forgotten, that we remember the individuals who survived the unsurvivable and gave hope to millions. Subscribe now and join us in preserving these essential narratives of resilience, faith, and the refusal to let oppression have the final word. Hit subscribe, leave your comment, and remember, 3 ropes tried to silence Josiah Freeman, and 3 times life or God or fate or biology said no. That's the power of survival. That's the miracle of hope. That's the legacy of the unkillable one.